U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has announced a new review of America's troop deployments in Europe. A move that has left Europe worrying on how to fill the gap if U.S. withdraws machine and money from the continent. Take a look at our next report for more details.
The world's most powerful military alliance is facing its most difficult moment. It is not an enemy, but a massive jolt from its biggest member. A decade-long security umbrella is now facing a stress test. The US, once the anchor of NATO's defense, is signaling a shift, pushing Europe to take more responsibility while Washington reconsiders its military footprint on the continent. In Brussels, US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth called for a reboot of the alliance, a NATO 3.0 that can deter threats, with Europe taking the lead on its own defense.
And it's not going to cut it anymore. And so we're doubling down on our effort to make NATO what it always was supposed to be, a balanced alliance with Europe in the lead for its own defense, NATO 3.0.
So what really is NATO 3.0? During the Cold War period, NATO 1.0 referred to a hard-edged, combat-focused military alliance that heavily concentrated on deterring the Soviet Union and defending the European continent. Post-Cold War was defined by NATO 2.0, the era of the unipolar American moment. This led to European defense austerity and a heavy reliance on the US. Now NATO 3.0 refers to a forced maturation of the alliance, marking a return to Cold War-era realism. The US is not just asking Europe to take care of its own security, but it is walking the talk. Trump administration has abruptly pulled out American troops from Europe. These troops were specially positioned to deter an enemy advance, jump into action in the event of a war.
So what the US has announced already before is that they had to lower somewhat their contribution to the NATO force model. The question yesterday came up, is this immediate or not? It is immediate. However, why I'm a little bit reluctant to say this is because it is a planning tool. So what would happen in reality? If war would break out, let's assume that an Article 5 situation would emerge, then all allies, including the US, will max out what they can do.
Hegseth also blasted NATO allies for not supporting the US in the Iran war. He blamed European allies for prioritizing gender equity and climate change instead of military readiness and traditional defense. This rude jolt from the US comes at a critical time for Europe, which has been nervous ever since Trump assumed office in his second term. The US president has called NATO as a paper tiger, accusing his European allies of freeloading of US military spending. Americans still have a massive presence in Europe. There are about 80,000 US troops currently deployed in the continent. US has also stationed its nuclear weapons across 5 NATO countries, providing the so-called nuclear umbrella. However, Europeans claim that they have significantly increased their defense spending in the recent years. The Russia-Ukraine war has helped spur a military build-up across Europe. They have also agreed to Trump's demand to increase NATO's spending benchmark from 2% of gross domestic product to 5%. Behind closed doors in the galleries of powers in Brussels, Paris and London, the big worry is how to fill the massive gap after the US withdrawals. Despite pouring in millions, there is an urgent need for more men, machine and money, something the European nations can't gather immediately. Bureau Report, WION World is One.